Would this project in any way hinder the ability for the Corps of Engineers to do the full project?
I don't see how it would hinder at all. In fact, it should complement the Corps' project. What we're talking about is adding sand to the beach. Nature will move that sand and shift it around as it does on a daily basis. The sand will all get mixed up. So when the Corps brings sand in, some of that sand will be mixed with the sand that the town puts on. And the hope is that at the end of the day, people will not be able to tell the difference between the federal sand, the local sand, or the native sand that's already on the beach that you've enjoyed the last many years. Whenever we come to a new site like Nags Head, we're starting oftentimes from scratch, but we try to draw on our experience from other places and try to find what's been studied and learned about in an area here. And those of you at home who come to the beach each year, you know how it changes. It's constantly changing. Some years you'll come here and the beach looks fairly wide. You have a nice sandy berm to the dry beach blanket area to sit on. And other times, like today, you come to the beach and we've just gone through a couple of tropical storms that have passed nearby, and the beach is really eroded back. And in fact, we have exposed concrete barriers at the base of some of the hotels. We have sandbags exposed. There's no dry beach, and about the only people you see out on the beach this week are the surfers, because there's not much place to put your beach blanket. So the first thing we try to do is determine what is your rate of erosion. And this is a tough thing if you only come to the beach once in a while. If you came on the good summer day when the beach was nice and wide, you say, well, things aren't so bad here. But if you come right after a storm, it looks really bad. So first we have to establish a common frame of reference. What erosion rate time period are we talking about? If we're talking about what happens just after a storm, well then we're going to see the beach swing all over the place. But if we talk in long geologic terms, we might be thinking that all of Nags Head will be washed away. Well, we all have to come up with a common frame of reference. And the frame of reference that we use typically for planning, and that you and the county and the town use, would be on the order of decades to maybe a century. Think in terms of wanting to have a beach here for the next generation so that your children can come to the beach, or for 2 generations or 3 generations. One of the first things we wanted to look at here is how bad has your erosion been over the last 10 to 50 years. Well, it turns out North Carolina DNR maintains historical aerial photographs, and these show something very interesting. It turns out your problem is bad, but it's not as bad as we might think. I have a diagram here that's taken right out of the data from North Carolina DENR. It turns out at the north end of Nags Head, the rate of erosion is only about 2 feet per year on average over the last 50 years. But as we go south along Nags Head, the rate of erosion increases to nearly 10 feet per year down here in the Hatteras National Seashore. That's good news, bad news. The good news is it's not so fast. It's only about 2 feet a year. But the bad news is we've got some very rapid erosion down at the south end. The other bad news is the beach is so narrow now that it can't accommodate these fluctuations back and forth. If a storm comes, there's just not enough width of the beach to protect the dunes, the walkovers, and everything else. So, okay, so we've been talking about the decadal rates of erosion. This is the 50-year erosion rate for Nags Head, and again, it's pretty good news. It's only 2 or 3 feet per year along much of Nags Head. So the question arises, why is it eroding in the first place? Well, all beaches are dynamic. They come and go, if you will. Storms cut away the beach, move the sand offshore or down the coast. And there are 2 fundamental ways the sand moves. It can move across the beach, being cut away from the dunes, moving offshore, or being cut away from the dunes and rolling over the dunes into the road. We see that every time there's a big storm around here. So that's what we call the cross-shore movement of sand. The other way sand can move is down coast toward Oregon Inlet, or sometimes actually back up to the north if the winds shift to the south and so on. So these two directions of sand movement really control the dynamics of the beach. And most of that sand movement, as it turns out, is perpendicular to the shore. Storms take it off, but then fair weather waves like these big swells that the surfers are on today, they actually bring the sand back up to the beach. Waves build beaches because they literally can push the sand right up the profile and build it up. And nature has this wonderful way of building the beach up in the summertime, just in time for the tourists to come in to lay out their beach blankets on that dry sand area, and for turtles to nest, although we don't have very many turtles up here because the water is cold and the beach is highly dynamic. But then when a storm comes along, a northeaster particularly, it will cut away that dry beach, which is just a little narrow portion of the profile, and it'll shift it offshore. And it's this onshore, offshore movement constantly. We call this the beach cycle, okay? If the average amount of sand moving offshore each year is balanced by the amount coming back onshore, what's the erosion rate? 0. But if the amount going offshore is a little bit more than what comes back onshore, we lose a little bit each year. And it's that amount lost that that Natural Resources is measuring with these photographs. Now, a photograph will just show you one point along the shoreline, the edge of the dune, the high water mark, or something like that. But we're really talking about a quantity of sand. That's what's important. So how do we measure that? Well, we take surveys that go out into deep water, and we measure the entire mass of sand that's on the beach. We've been doing this quite a bit for the last 3 or 4 years, and we compared it to some data that the Corps of Engineers took back in 1994. And it turns out, over the last 10 years or so, we've lost the equivalent of 20,000 truckloads of sand per year along Nags Head. 250,000 cubic yards per year is being washed away. Some going offshore, some going down to Oregon Inlet. Now, we don't know how much is going to either one, but that doesn't really matter. We know that we're losing 250,000 cubic yards per year over the last 10 years. So that gives us a measure of how much sand we'd have to replace if we wanted to just keep pace with erosion. 250,000 yards a year, or about 20,000 dump truck fulls. Now, many of you probably saw all that sand hauling that was done after Hurricane Isabel. Trucks hauled sand from inland, placed it along the dune, built up the berm. A lot of people were appreciative of that because it protected their walkovers. But it really is just addressing a small sliver of the problem. It's not building up the entire beach. And a lot of people say, well, yeah, we bring in the truckloads of sand like this and it washes right away. Well, sure, it's going to wash away because each year we have sand moving back and forth across the beach, washing out of the dunes. We would have to add many more times that amount of sand to restore the beach. And that's what the plan is designed to do. To make up for that sand deficit, the 250,000 yards each year that we're losing, to make it up for a period of 10 years, maybe even longer, so that we can have a viable beach that will respond to these natural processes of coming and going.